This presentation explains the use of questionnaires as a method of evaluation. A questionnaire is not the same as a survey, although many people use the word synonymously. They contain a looser form of questions rather than the traditional Likert-type scale that we find on a survey. This means you'll have other types of questions that aren't necessarily going to be Likert type. And you'll have the opportunity to combine open-ended and closed-ended questions. Open-ended being, what do you think are the greatest advantages of participating in this program? And then people could list what they want rather than you feeding them a list of advantages and forcing them to choose. Forcing them to choose an answer is closed-ended. So there are advantages to using a questionnaire. The responses are gathered in a standardized way, so questionnaires do become more objective than interviews. They're not as objective as a survey, but they are more objective than an interview. It's a quick way to collect information. You can potentially collect information from a large group of people. There are a few disadvantages too. You tend to administer a questionnaire after an event has ended, so people may forget important items. Open-ended questions can generate large amounts of data that can take a long time to process and analyze. Your respondents may answer superficially, especially if the questionnaire takes a long time to complete. So if they look at your questionnaire and it goes on, or they get bored from the very beginning, they may just very quickly go through and mark things, say none, don't care, don't know, and that can certainly impact your ability to get data that you can use to assess your program. These can be administered in a variety of ways. You can send a questionnaire out by mail and have them return it to you. You can do a telephone questionnaire. I've done that before as a type of needs assessment for a course. A questionnaire can be online. There are several types of questionnaires from which you may choose. There are those called post-activity questionnaires. They're administered after the participant has completed the class, the program, the training. There are pre, then post questionnaires, and these are the ones that folks are given at the very beginning, before the training or the course begins, and then again at the very end, and the responses have to be compared. There's the retrospective post, then pre questionnaire, which I tend to just refer to as the retrospective pretest. And there is the post-project questionnaire. So let's look at these in more detail. We'll begin with the post-activity questionnaire. In this, you have a limited number of questions that ask participants to rate the effectiveness of various aspects of the activity. And this could be a workshop, a program. Usually this type of questionnaire does best if someone has recently completed whatever it is you are evaluating. They tend to be very short to reduce the amount of time that respondents need to complete them, and then this increases the response rate. Oftentimes folks will do these before they leave a session. They're quantitative, which means they're collecting numbers, and generally consist of close-ended questions. So you might have directions such as select the box, or you would use scales or a rating. You can include open-ended questions on this, but it's best to limit these to make the data analysis and reporting easier. So this is a very brief questionnaire, tends to be very short, close-ended questions. Then we have the pre, then post questionnaires. You would give this to the participant both before the intervention or the program and after it to compare behaviors and practices and then hopefully identify any changes. Again, this is more likely to be used with professional development. Requires participants to complete 2 questionnaires, though, so that you can compare their responses from pre to post. One of the problems here is if someone enters a training late, then you may not have a pre on them. If they leave it early, you may have a pre, but you may not have a post, and you have to have both of them in order to use the information. Then we have the retrospective, what I call pre-test. And this tends to overcome the constraints of the pre and post designs. You administer it at only one point in time, and that's going to be at the end of the training or the program, and so people aren't tired of completing a questionnaire at that point. You also haven't warned them ahead of time what's going to be on it. When you take a pre and a post questionnaire, at the beginning you find out all of the things you're going to talk about during the training, and now you already have been keyed in to recognize, oh, I've got to remember to learn this because it's going to be on the post test. One of the benefits then of the post then pre-design is that participants answer these questions with their same knowledge and understanding of the issue, thereby reducing the possibility of response shift bias. Sometimes people in a pretest will guess and actually get a question correct, so you really have not discovered their true knowledge. Whereas with this retrospective pretest, you reduce that possibility of the response shift. And this occurs when participants are understanding the issues have been impacted by the intervention. And they may answer your post questionnaires differently as to how they answered the pre-questionnaire because they understand it better now. And that way you're not really measuring what they've learned or what has changed. You're measuring the fact now they understand your questionnaire. So here's an example of how to set up a statement in a retrospective pretest. And you would have them to select the response that best represents their practices now that they've taken part in this project, and then select the response that best represents their practices prior to it. So again, just a really quick example. Notice you don't need to give them a lot of choices. It depends on your question. And if you want to know more about retrospective pretests, I've included a link for you, so you can just pull this up and click on it and you can learn more. Again, you do not have to design a questionnaire for this assignment and for this class, but you may be doing these as part of your job, and it's nice to know how to design correctly. We also have a post-project questionnaire. This is a limited number of questions that ask the participants to self-report on the changes they've experienced due to taking part in this project, this training, this program. There is a concern with this. You have a risk of social desirability bias in the answers because they may want to portray themselves as being better than they are. So it's social desirability. An example of this type of question is what I have here. I've increased my composting of organic green kitchen waste following my participation in the project. Well, that sounds like something you really should do. So it may be that a person is likely to write 1 when maybe they're closer to 3 or 4 or even a 5. Whereas if you ask them to compare their knowledge of it before or their likelihood of doing it now with their likelihood before, you may get a different sort of response. A pre-then post-test design may be appropriate in larger projects where you have a lot of evaluation resources available so that you can ensure the participants are motivated enough to respond to 2 questionnaires, perhaps providing some incentives, a drawing, something like that. Well, mostly in the community college, you're not going to have a lot of access to incentives. So you may want to think about the retrospective pretest or post-questionnaire because when you have smaller numbers of people participating, and when you don't have a lot of resources or money to use. If you have any questions regarding use of a questionnaire, please let me know and I'll be happy to answer them. And that's it.